Hi everybody, welcome to our third lecture. So in this lecture we're going to touch on the role or the interface between growth and maturation in youth sport. There's a neat reading by Towson that's been posted into Canvas. What I really like about this reading is that it's going to touch on the things that the lecture considers, but it's the combination of the pediatric exercise physiology researcher with practice. And so if you look at the authorship, you'll see that one of the authors is from Manchester United Football Club, and he's in charge of their youth development squad. So this is where pediatric, you wonder what you're going to do, or how does pediatric exercise physiology interface, was a great example of that interface between real work, where you've got youth sport talking to pediatric exercise physiologists. So what do we know about youth sport and how kids get into youth sports? And this is a quote that came out of cricket. I know cricket's not really a mass sport in Canada, but for many countries, and including the UK, cricket is huge. And a lot of sports suffer from systemic bias. How do you get into those sports? And this was a kind of tongue-in-cheek post, but in all honesty, there's truth to quite a lot of this. So if you want to be a professional cricketer in UK, there's some things that you have to be, but they require zero talent. You have to be born in September. Why? Because you have to be the biggest in your class to get selected. You have to be an early maturer because your system's going to be, you're going to be able to throw a ball further, hit a ball further. You've got to be wealthy, you've got to be white, you've got to go to a private school, which is what they mean by independent school. You've got to live in a mid-sized town, it's got to have a cricket pitch. You have to likely have a sporting parent, even a coach who's a parent, an older sibling who you can play with, and there's a bit of luck in there. But I'm going to really focus on today the Be Born in September. If we were to translate this to North America, it would be Born in January. So it's the first month of the administrative school year of the system that you're living in. And it seems to be the case that in many sports, I'm going to show you the evidence that the kids who are born in that first month have a higher likelihood to get brought into an elite training. And it's nothing to do with their talent. It's simply to do with their size. So systemic bias is a real problem. And I really want to try to illustrate the systemic bias that relates to growth and development and maturation. So we call this being born earlier than other kids in your year. We call it the relative age effect. And it's called a relative age effect because it's a very arbitrary banding. If I'm born, as I said, in Canada, I would be using January 1. If I was born and being brought up in the school system in the United Kingdom, I would be using September 1. So we band kids by chronological age. We have you playing in under 11s or under 12s or under 13 age groups. And there's an overrepresentation of kids born in those first few months of the year, usually the first quarter of the year, compared to other kids born in other points in the year on the elite junior teams. Why? Well, think about what we thought in terms of growth and development. You're about 12 months older than the kid who's born at the end of the year. You're at least 6 months older than the kid who's born in the middle of the year. So you've had 6 more or 12 more months of growing and you're bigger. So this is bias because it doesn't equate to being more mature. So it doesn't equate to having better physical development or necessarily better ability. You're just bigger. But it is a bias, and it is notable in many sports, and I'm going to give you those some of these examples. So I've started with cricket, which probably doesn't resonate. We are going to go to soccer, but here's NFL, something that probably resonates more with us living in this part of the world. And this was a study of NFL draftees, those drafted between 2000 and 2005 into the NFL teams, and when they were born. And remember, North America, January 1 is your optimal month. So this on the y-axis is the number of players, and on the x-axis born in these particular quartiles of the year, from January to March, April to June, July to September, October to December. And if we were to say we should have an equal distribution of kids born across the year, why is the month that you're born important? It shouldn't be important. You're getting drafted into the NFL. But if we actually look at the data of who was drafted into the NFL, there's a bias. And if you look at the data where the red line is showing you the decline in the number of draftees by the quartile of the year that they were born in, with the majority favouring the first quartile and the minority from the last quartile. And it's an influence of size. So this is now at NFL draftee level, but that's occurred at a much younger level when they started to get selected into different coaching streams when they were probably between the ages of 10 and 14. And we'll see what some of those outcomes give us. So the why is there a relative age effect at the NFL draftee level? Well, it's occurring much younger, and it's all to do with the size you were or at that age, and you're getting into the next level of expertise, not necessarily because you are more expert, but simply because you're bigger. There is an assumption that you're more physiologically developed. That's an assumption, and we'll come back to that. But you are getting more training. So if you go into the next level up in terms of expertise, you're probably getting more one-on-one coaching. You're getting better training. So the more coaching and training you get, the quicker you start to progress. And the likelihood is you become a better player compared to the kids who are not getting the training, not getting the coaching attention, and they start to fall behind. And it's the premise of being bigger in the first place. So the real take home for this lecture, and hopefully it's going to get illustrated by good data, is actually you're not more mature. It's a different concept. You might be bigger, but it doesn't mean you're more mature. You can have a similar effect. Because you're bigger, you are probably physically stronger than the tiny kid, but you're not more mature. And the maturity is part of the process of some of those other attributes that are important in sport that come, like cardiorespiratory fitness and speed, endurance, and so on and so forth. So we'll come back to that, but that's a really important concept that creates the bias that we assume bigger means more mature. So this is taking us back to football, but this readers soccer. This is the English Football Association. So this is the National School Boys and Girls Football Association of England. And this was data they collected across a number of years and published in 2001. So these are school-age children, 9 to 16-year-olds, who are being selected at this upper level. And it's really important to say to you here that when you're selected for the National Association, you're getting picked up by Premier League teams. They have youth teams, Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, all of the teams, Man City, they all have youth teams, and they are picking from the national selection, and these kids are getting recruited into teams. As a sidebar, for those of you who have Netflix, watch the David Beckham documentary. He's picked up by Manchester United at 14 years of age. He's from London, but he has to go live in Manchester to join their youth squad and, of course, make it to their full adult Premier League squad. So they're young, the kids who are getting picked up at these elite levels. And, of course, there's a huge draw for the success and the money that comes with making it into the Premier League. So what you're seeing here is the month of birth. And remember, for the UK, we're now looking at September 1. So the quartiles now are being hacked into from September to August rather than January to December. And you can see that this is the percentage of the players being selected. And they are predominantly from that first 4 months of the year. Well, first 3 months of the year, really, the quartile. So to be born in September is huge, because you're predominantly older. And if you're born between May and August, you really don't stand much of a chance to get picked up by the National Association. Doesn't mean you're not good footballers. It doesn't mean you're not going to develop into very talented footballers. It's simply a size effect of being born earlier to get selected, later and not get selected. And often many of these kids who are the late May to August babies, they catch up, right? Their part of the journey is different and they get to where they want to be. And you sometimes, once you get into adulthood, then this relative age effect can disappear because of the catch up, but you lose so many children along the way. So the underdog effect is rare, but essentially what this is showing you is that to get into Premier League soccer teams, you make sure that you're born in September if you live in the UK, which is crazy. So what does this actually mean in terms of the kids who are older, the ones born in September to September, October, December, compared to those younger May to August babies? Well, as an older kid, you're going to get selected. You're going to get better coaching and training. You're then going to experience more success and you're going to be viewed as gifted because you've had more training. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the younger kids are not likely to get selected. They don't get the coaching and training, so they don't show as quickly as to be gifted. They're more likely to fall behind. And it has a huge impact on self-perception and self-esteem. So if you're a coach, are you actually aware of this? Are you aware that you're taking kids in just because of when their birthday is? And what could you do to mitigate that effect of this relative age effect on your particular sport, and in this case, in soccer? So just a little example of, also another example of size influences in sport, but take a look at this graph. This is an over 15 age group, and these are the quartiles of the year from the first quartile. This is data from North America, so it doesn't matter when the first quartile is, but let's call this January 1. Quartile 1 in the black box and quartile 4 in the white box, and the birth rate distribution. So how many kids were brought into this over 15 age group in this sport? And it's the opposite, right? It's the opposite example to our soccer example, or to our NFL example, or in the case of cricket, to our cricket example. So what sport is this? What sport is favouring this smaller body? And it's kind of an obvious answer. It's gymnastics. We think of elite gymnasts, Simone Biles, they're tiny. Now they are small because you wouldn't be able to do the biomechanical moves that you're doing if you had long levers. You have to have a certain physique for gymnastics. And of course, the sport favours the small body. So same would be the case for figure skating. So I just wanted to give you this as an example, because it's not just the sports that you have to be big in, but there are more examples of sports that you have to be big in than sports that you have to be small in. So most of the data is in the favouring the ones who are born earlier and bigger rather than the favouring the ones who are born later. But this is a great paper where they looked at those individuals in elite gymnastics, and yes, they were all born later. So why should we care about this? Well, we should recognise firstly that it's unfair. Sorry, don't want to go forward yet. All sports should have equal opportunity. And it doesn't, you can't choose when you were born. But let's face it, if you were born in December, you're not going to get into a team probably for NFL, for NHL, for soccer, for all the sports that require size. So it's counterproductive also, because we are taking kids into a talent pool who aren't necessarily the most talented, because we're eliminating kids who probably could be as talented, but we just haven't given them their time to show that talent. So we actually reduce our talent pool that we're choosing from. So it's inefficient. It's interesting that our early maturers, often if we take the whole group of kids who are brought into elite sport because they were bigger, generally speaking, they don't make it out the other end always, because the rest of the kids catch up. And interesting data again from the English Premier League teams, that those who were bigger and were born in that first quartile of the year had a 33% shorter career than those who were the underdogs who actually did make it, who were born later and did make it. So really we should care about this, particularly around equality and equity in sport. So just a little bit about maturation. This is a really nice model. This was the Youth Development Talent Identification Model. And what this shows you, these two graphs, the top is for females, the bottom is for males. It shows you that there's windows of opportunity when training a certain attribute is optimized. So we've looked at peak height velocity last 2 weeks, and we know that this metric of we can align developmental age to our skeletal age using peak height velocity. And if I overlay peak height velocity for the girls and for the boys around the times that we know that we get the best response to training certain attributes of fitness that are relevant to sport, you start to see that your place or your point in the maturational world matters. So if we look at the girls first in the top graph, you can see how some of these attributes align to peak height velocity. So around about at peak height velocity or just after, speed is easier to train and very much where you should be focusing on. And at the same sort of time and a little later, then you also should be focusing on endurance, fitness, aerobic capacity. So strength comes later. Remember, muscle follows skeleton. So you're waiting a couple of years after peak height velocity for your muscle to gain. And so strength is coming last. So if I was a coach in an elite young team, I wouldn't be focusing on stamina so much, perhaps prior to peak height velocity. Skills are everything at that age. Certainly flexibility can be focused on. There is the beginnings of speed because coordination starts, but the skills prior to puberty. And at puberty, then we start to maximize those windows of gain in attributes such as speed, strength, and aerobic capacity. For the boys, it's a wee bit different. We would be focusing on aerobic capacity prior to strength and prior to speed in the boys. And this is really related to rate of growth and specifically the large gain in muscle mass that you see in the boys compared to the girls during and after the age of peak height velocity. So again, we would align to maturity rather than to chronological age in terms of developing these attributes, which of course make a huge difference in your performance in a sport. But prior to peak height velocity, it's all about skills. So what can we do to counteract this bias, this systemic bias, this inefficiency from this relative age effect? Well, there's a fabulous approach that's been developed by a number of groups, and it's been taken up by lots of professional leagues, and one of which is US Soccer. So, this has to be now field level measurements. You've playing around with lab data where we can bring things in, we can do height, weight, sitting height. If you're working with large groups of youth in sport, not necessarily all these things that you have easy access to. So the simplest somatic skeletal measure that we've used is the Camas-Roche method of predicted adult height. So you can use percent of predicted. Remember, all you need is how much the height of your parents. You can calculate the percent of your predicted adult height on the basis of your parental height. And this was done in 10 to 15-year-olds. So they look at their current height divided by their predicted adult height, just times by 100, and you're going to get your percent attained of adult height. So instead of grouping you now by age, I'm going to group you by the percent of adult height attained. So it may be I have kids of a similar size now, and I'm going to have kids of different ages in my squads, but they're all similar in size and similar in somatic maturity. So these are the percent of their predicted adult heights, 86%, 88%, 89%. They're 13, 14 and 15 years of age, but they are similar in terms of somatic maturity, and they should be playing in a team together. So what I'd really like you to do is to click on the link below and watch the video. It's 3 minutes, but it's fabulous. It explains this at a level that's, when we talk about your case studies and you're presenting this to a parent or a coach, it explains it at a level that's going to be understood by the user and why it is that we should be doing this rather than saying we're going to put the under 13s together when they're all of different sizes. So take a pause, please watch the 3-minute video clip. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that because I love the way that video has been produced. And when we think about messaging and having to move beyond, the formalities of what we learn at university and finding ways to explain good science to those who are actually going to use it, the parent and the child and the coach, I think the US Soccer did a lovely job of explaining biobanding. So you now know that, when you use chronological age, you can be putting two kids together who are monstrously different in size. And somebody's going to get hurt, and the large kid's going to dominate. So take a look at the photo on the right-hand side of the screen. The young man, Romelu Lukaku, he's a famous soccer player. I think he played for Chelsea. Is on the left-hand side of the screen, and there's a smaller boy on the right-hand side of the screen. This is a fabulous example of age, chronological age versus biological age. They are both 13 years of age in this photograph. It's hard to believe that that kid is 13 years of age, Lukaku, but he's 13 years of age. And he is playing in an academy match. So this is the National Academy. This is where you get picked up by Premier League teams. He's playing in an academy match of a 13-year-old with a 13-year-old who's on the other side of the other team. It just showcases how crazy this combination is. You know who's going to be the physically dominant player in this situation. And he was so large for his age, his mother used to have to bring his birth certificate to every match to prove to the referees he was indeed 13. He looked like he was 18 at that age. The point is, biobanding would take all of the kids similar to him, and he would be playing with kids much older than him, but much more suitable in terms of his size and the stage of development that he's at. Whereas the other child, who looks like a 13-year-old, would be playing in his group. But we wouldn't eliminate him because he's not big. We would put all of the kids into that bucket together who are same skeletal maturity, similar in size, and we know that skills development is everything prior to puberty. They're going to be skilled kids, but they're not going to get dominated by the physically more developed athlete. So it promotes safety, equity, and also it promotes expertise. Both of them get good coaching, both of them get to show and to improve because they're getting training and coaching that's suitable. So we have to recognise that early maturers, and that would certainly be the case with Lukaku, are going to be taller and they're going to have a much greater lean mass, which means, think of the boy data that I just showed you. If he has a much greater lean mass, he's down in here somewhere, he's already got way in advance aerobic capacity to that other boy. His strength, his speed, all of these attributes that are really important are going to be showing. So he's talented, right? So we need physical strength and we also need technical proficiency, but maturation matters when it comes to the physical strength, the speed, the stamina that we need. So for that late maturing boy, this little lad here, it's going to be less physically challenging not to have to be playing against the big guy, but he's actually going to increase gamemanship, all of the technical and physical skills at the right rate for his development. So his opportunity is also going to be equally as good, but it will go with his developmental progress, and it will put him in with kids who are suitable for him to be playing with. And that's what US Soccer are doing, and they've been doing it now for a few years. And what they've done is they've increased their talent pool, because the small boy on our right-hand side is going to grow. He could turn out to be bigger, taller, more muscular than Lukaku when he's fully grown. He might turn out to be a far better soccer player when he's fully grown. We just got to give him the chance and the sporting opportunity during that time lag for him to catch up. And that's exactly what US Soccer have started to find. The talent pool is greater, the teams are getting stronger. So we see I've said this with Lukaku already, he's already ready for technical challenging, physically challenging teams, and he needs to get in and play with people of a similar maturational and physicality status that he is in terms of his place in that maturity journey. So, talent identification. You can't be biased by maturity. You've got to be able to judge the overall potential with not just looking at the size differential and knowing at that age, at 13, Lukaku is going to dominate and look like he's the best player you're ever going to find in the world. And that's really what biobanding is trying to do. So short class lecture today. What I'd like you to do, because you need a little bit of extra time, is prepare for our next Wednesday session. So I hope you enjoy that, because the influence that maturation has on sport is profound from an equity perspective. But in the case of our case study and the debate that we're going to get engaged with on Wednesday, it also matters at a appropriate growth and development level as well. And remember, we had this question, which is basically the question you've got for your case study, which is elite competition and engagement in gymnastics inhibiting growth and delaying maturation? So this is a real issue, and there have been points of view which are yes, quite possibly, and no, probably not, depending how we look at the extant evidence. And I want you to be able to debate this on Wednesday. So what are we going to do? Well, you're going to read 2 papers. That's why today's lecture is a little shorter. One is the point of view of quite possibly it does inhibit growth and delay maturation, and the other, published in the same journal as a point of view, was no, probably not. You're going to read these 2 papers and you're going to come to class being able to defend either yes or no. So what are the defences for yes and what are the defences for no? So you need to read both and have both points of view. When we get to class on Wednesday, I'm going to split you into groups. There's going to be 4 different groups. Each group will have 2 teams in it. And you're going to be randomly assigned as a pro or con side. That's why you need to have read both articles and had your justification for pro. Yes, it does cause restrained growth and delayed maturation, and no, it doesn't, the con side. At the beginning of class, we're going to randomly assign the groups. You're going to be given a hat to pick a piece of paper out of. It's going to tell you whether you're pro, con, and which of the first, second, third, or fourth teams you are in. You're going to cluster with your team. You're going to get 10 minutes to prepare your pro or con arguments. Then the first 2 teams, and that would have been randomly selected, will be given 5 minutes each. First pro will go, then con will go. Then there's a break, 3 minutes, and the next 2 teams will be rebutting pro and con arguments, and the third, another second rebuttal, and then the final rebuttal and closing statements. And we as a group at the very end can take a vote on whether we were pro or con. This is peer reviewed. So there's going to be a peer review sheet where you grade the other teams other than your own. So if you were, say, in the 4th final rebuttal and you're one of the 2 teams in the final rebuttal, you're not grading yourselves, but you are giving the 3rd, 2nd and 1st 2 teams, you are actually scoring them. And the peer review and my review get totaled up to your team score, which you all will get a same score for that team. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to have this group debate, and we're going to debate the pro and con arguments on the basis of those 2 readings. So please, tomorrow when you've done your lecture, it's short. I'd like you to spend time reading those 2 papers, and you need to create your pro-con arguments because you don't know which team you're on until Wednesday. So we'll talk about this again at the beginning of class. Be respectful in the debates. I don't know how many debates you've been engaged in. So let the other team speak while they're speaking, but challenge their ideas and arguments. It's the ideas and arguments, not the person you're challenging. Back up your position with reason and use appropriate language, please. So there can't be any swearing, sexist, racist, or homophobic comments. You can also require speakers to paraphrase what was said by the person who spoke before, sharing their position. So you can ask people to just say again, just to be sure. If you're not sure what they argued, maybe the pro team have said something, and you can start your con argument against by saying, I think you said such and such, is that correct? They can paraphrase and you can get them to confirm, but it is your 5 minutes or your 3 minutes or your 2 minutes for your speaking. So be respectful. We'll go back over that before we start. So looking forward to this and looking forward to Wednesday.